Gavin.
Hey, Louie.
He has risen, babe, because it is Easter. The bunnies are out. I've got eggs coming out of the wazoo. I'm
Not
happy
the
to be here.
wazoo.
The wazoo. Also, we're recording a daytime podcast, which I love because the sun is shining, spring has sprung.
That's why my cocktail is just a coffee.
That's my favorite cocktail. You're blitzed. You're wasted, Gavin.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Awful.
We have a special guest with us today. She is not a ghoul. It's Kate Erbland. Hi, Kate.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me on Easter Sunday.
I know. This is our church, okay?
Yeah. Thank you for coming on, Kate. Kate, you are somebody that I've actually wanted on the show for a very long time, but I've been too afraid to ask because you're the where you are on like film criticism echelon is like way too high. And so I'm always just like, that's me miming trying to get up there because podcasts are, infamously a visual medium. But I do want to point out that you are the executive editor of film at IndieWire. Thank you for coming on. I mean, I know we're friends outside of this, and I'm not normally like this, but now that we're in a position where I can be like, I'm going to gush. Thank you so much.
Gavin's about to bust.
Well, thank you for humoring my idea of where I was just like, Andrew McCarthy, because it's like, always really loved to say movies.
Yeah, I was like, thank you for coming on, but also thank you for choosing chaos and choosing fun. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes we have to be really serious in talking about the people we're talking about, but with Andrew, what a blast!
And I do have to say, one of the things I like about you is I think you have incredible taste, and I think back about a year ago. To last year's South by Southwest, and I was like on Twitter raving about Ninja Baby, and you were like, yes, and I was like, well, the only reason I watched it was because of you, and you were like,
Aww.
yeah, you're like, that's what it's for, the IndieWire articles, and I was like, yeah, and I didn't say this at the time, but I was like, but I'm in this world, I'm not a critic really, but I have a lot of critics around me and passing in the night, but you're one of the few that like I trust, and so when I read your stuff I'm like, okay, that's something I will check out. Yeah,
a trusted source.
So trust me, you are in the echelon for me.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's what's so important about, I think people don't get that about critics. I mean, you guys obviously get that. It's like, you need to find the critics that taste matches up with your taste. You
Absolutely.
can always appreciate, like I always tell people, like, Movie Line, dearly departed Movie Line. I used to love reading Michelle Orange's reviews because she was such a great writer and she always pointed out things that I'd never thought of myself. But our taste was completely different. Like I knew if Michelle loved a movie, I was not going to like it, and vice versa. But I always loved reading her reviews, and I always like to mention that because I think it's important.
Totally.
That's literally the most important part of it is it's like, do you enjoy reading it or do you enjoy the take? Because if you don't, like if you just hate reading everything, what's the point?
Misery. You're living in misery.
Absolutely.
Before we get to what we're here to talk about today, we have a little bit of old business. Our last episode, we talked about Mr. Warren Beatty, Mr. New Hollywood himself.
Oh, he's so vain.
With our good friend DJ, not DJ. Why did I say DJ?
It's his Twitter handle. Every time I read his Twitter.
DJ Dan Mecca on the ones and twos. But yes, we asked you guys to go vote for your favorite Warren Beatty movie, and here are the results. In last place was my pick, Bulworth, with 10%. In third place was Gavin's pick, Bugsy, with 12%. In second place was Reds, which was Dan's pick, 30%. And in first place, Bonnie and Clyde, 48%. Can't say I'm surprised. I mean, no. It's a banger. It's a banger.
I'm a little shocked. Bugsy was in the last place for a very long time, and I was not willing to campaign for it because as much as I love his performance in that movie, I was like, rightfully so, Bulworth, Reds, Bonnie and Clyde, and so I'm a little shocked that I edged you out in Bulworth because I think Bulworth is maybe a little bit better because it's more meaningful. It's from him, and it may be a little dated, but I think some of the stuff that's not dated is very good.
Yeah, Kate, do you have any quick Warren Beatty takes?
I'm disappointed to see where Bulworth placed. I think people must not have seen it, or like maybe they've seen it too recently where they're like, oh, it feels too much like the real world. But it's so very different than everything else he's done. And as Gavin said, like it's from him, which adds a very different level to how you think about him.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of watching, I'm always going to come back to my text of American Dreams, with a Z, just because like watching, I mean, Bulworth is from the same era, and like watching those movies now, it's like, what is like life? Everything is so real. Like, how did they fucking know? It's kind of like, I don't know, magical, mysterious. But yes, I agree. I love Bulworth.
I think what you're hitting at too is it's hard to do social critique and parody in the moment.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those things have to age. I always think of, and this is another random one, but I always think of Josie and the Pussycats. When I first saw it in the early 2000s, I was like, this kind of sucks. And then after I like watched it, I was like, oh, this is a lot smarter than anybody gave it credit for. And it's so much more interesting and it's really funny and like nails the era and also just takes the piss right out of it.
Oh, yeah. You realized, oh, I'm homophobic. Crazy.
Yeah. Hate you.
I love that movie. But okay, Warren Beatty, thank you. Great episode. But Kate, please, can you tell our listeners who we are here to talk about today on this episode?
We are here to talk about one of the more iconic brats of the Brat Pack, Mr. Andrew McCarthy. And it's so funny. Last night, some friends had us over for Passover, and then afterwards we went out to a bar. And I ended up talking to this guy at the bar who used to live in our neighborhood. It was a whole thing. But I mentioned something about Andrew McCarthy, and he was like, oh, did you realize that later in his career, he became a travel writer? And I'm like, sir, I'm about to appear on a podcast about Andrew McCarthy. I think that I know that. But I'm just like, I thought it was so funny that this 60-year-old man knew who Andrew McCarthy was and was also caught up to date on his career turns. And I wonder if your listeners are as well. So we'll find out, baby.
Right.
I was not. Andrew McCarthy had appeared in several movies that I really liked as a teen, and I had no idea what happened to him since, outside of like a random appearance on like Law and Order. But like, I had no idea. He has had such a very different post, Brat Pack fame career, but it's also been, one in travel, one in the arts. He's raised a family. And I guess, like, obviously I should have known these things, but I had no idea that he was directing as much as he is. And so he's actually, like, pretty fascinating.
It's crazy because I will admit that I was not very familiar with a lot of his career. I watched, obviously, we did a John Hughes episode, and so I watched a couple of things that he was in for that. But, like, the Brat Pack... all that stuff really didn't penetrate South Texas in my upbringing. But I was like, oh, him. Yeah, of course, like him. I've seen him. He's very distinct. And he represents a lot of, I think, like, of young 80s, just like cool guy, accessible everyman type stuff. Kate, how did you get to know Andrew, or what's your relationship with him and his career?
Well, I think when I was like, even in, later elementary school and middle school, I was definitely a latchkey kid. So I would come home after school and I would watch like tons of TBS and TNT movies. So that was like a big chunk of like the John Hughes movies. My parents never regulated what I watched. And obviously they couldn't do it when I was a latchkey kid and they weren't at home. And so I had this like real affection for the sort of iconic 80s teen movies that I think we associate Andrew McCarthy and so much of the Brat Pack with. As like, I mean, I guess this was mostly when I was growing up in suburban Las Vegas, and it's like in the early 90s. And it was just weird that I had such an affection for this stuff because I don't think many of my peers did at the time. Obviously, now I have found my people. But yeah, and obviously I had a big crush on him. Like, he was so cute. And he was definitely my favorite Brat Packer. And so I think that's where, yes. Who are your favorite Brat Packers?
No, I mean, it's funny because I think in the echelon of the Brat Pack, he was always the like kind of like goofy one, quote, not hot one, like next to Rob Lowe, like, and I'm not saying he's not handsome. He obviously is a handsome man, but like
Louis is the world's biggest Emilio Estevez fan.
Yeah,
like,
honestly,
let's just get it out there.
Okay, you're dancing around it and it's going to come out. So just come on.
I got to be real. I got to be honest. No, I think he's like, and he talks about like, how he wasn't like, he thought he wasn't the right fit for Pretty in Pink, and how they wanted like the handsome, like big quarterback guy. And it was like Molly Ringwald who was like, no, sensitive guy is who we should cast. And like, he's, I think a big part of his like power, and he talks about it in his book, is like, he's got that smile, like he's got that charm, and he can just like disarm anyone. And that's kind of like what got him to be able to like push through the Rob Lowe's and maybe the more like edgy athletic guys in the Brat Pack. But okay. Anyway, enough chit chat and small talk. Why don't we get into our rewind? Andrew McCarthy does have a book. It's called Brat. I believe the subtitle is like an 80s story.
Yes. I read it. I have it. It's just out of reach, but it's over there.
I was listening to it. I like his voice a lot. Andrew McCarthy. He's got like a
great voice.
Great voice. But okay. Andrew McCarthy was born in Westfield, New Jersey, November 29th, 1962. That makes him 59 years old.
So young. Still so young.
Still so young. This man literally has been acting for 10,000 years. I cannot believe. He's 3 brothers, 2 older, 1 younger. Listening to the book, it's kind of, there's some darkness with his childhood and his family, and I will say, like, he grew up in Jersey, close to the city, and he talks about like not having a lot of money growing up, but also I was like, that sounds pretty middle class to me. Yeah. Especially like, and I was like, well, my life wasn't that, but like when he's saying he was embarrassed to like go on dates with girls because they had like 2 TVs in the house and he only had one, and I was just like, okay, yeah, but like you still had a 3-bedroom house in Jersey. So
you like reference having your own room.
Yeah,
that's enough for me.
Yeah, that's enough. But he had a very strained relationship with his father, who he wasn't quite athletic like his older brothers were. He was petite, if you will, a late bloomer. He was very worried about his voice changing. It kind of feels like classic middle child syndrome, even though as a middle child, I can say that.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is it feels very... I think I had a better relationship with my father than he paints with his father, because it does get dark, and we'll get to that later on. But he was like pretty classic mama's boy, and as a mama's boy myself, like I feel like I can say that, and that's it seemed like his mother sort of doted on him the way that she didn't with her like star athlete children, and and I think there's something to be said about the like maybe not as butch child, even if they're not queer as a child, like that sort of gravitates towards the like finding their own people and not having to deal with the like team and aspect. And
it's funny, like he's literally living out a lot of the characters in his early career are him. Like this is the outsider, kind of like not fitting in, but who still can like charm your pants off. I think, does he say that his mom calls him the daydreamer?
Yes.
He's her daydreamer. His dad has some vague, like, business doings with, like, ventures, is what he calls them, and takes percentages. Yeah, whatever that means.
We're all arts people.
Yeah.
Ever money? Heard of, money, white collar crime. Ever heard of it? But when he was a teen, they're doing pretty well, and so they decide they move the family, and they go to a prep school where, again, like I just watched Heaven Help Us, and I was like, okay, the prep school vibes, like I'm getting all, like, it's all happening. It wasn't until his sophomore year, I think, when he like gets cut from the basketball team, when he's like, I have nothing to do, and he kind of smeagles into a theater after school class thing.
I love that the way he describes it in his book is that he just started showing up. Yeah. They were in the middle of rehearsing Hello Dolly, like months in rehearsal. Yeah, exactly. And he's like, I'll sing around the piano with everyone else.
Right. And I also just love the idea that like Hello Dolly is what gets him into acting. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, it's a route for a lot of us.
Yeah,
just saying.
Truly is. Yes, and so it's there where he realizes that he wants to act. He has like a fun bit moment where he like improvises on stage and kisses a girl, and people laugh, and he's like, was this what it feels like to be a star? And pretty quickly his father's like, no, hate that so much, not gonna be supportive about that at all. But his mom is like, get out of here. We love our little actor.
He loved a little daydreamer.
Yeah. And so much so that like his parents for a summer are sending him off to like the city to do like an acting camp. He says the acting camp kind of sucks and he doesn't like really learn anything there, but which casual, imagine. Yeah, I went to acting camp and it was lame.
Yeah. It was on like 70th Street in Manhattan, but ugh, the worst.
I know, can't believe. But he realizes, oh, I love New York City and I want to be in New York and I want to go to school there. And, he's not a good student. And it's so funny. It reminds me so much of like when I was in high school, I had everything about like city life was stuff in the TV that I didn't think was real. Like I didn't know like you could do that stuff. And so when he's like, oh, I want to be an actor. And they're like, oh, well, do you read plays? And he's like, no. he's like, I don't want to do anything. I want to do this thing, but like I don't know anything about this world at all. And I was like, yeah, that kind of was me when I was like in college. Like I was like, I want to be a journalist, but like I don't want to do anything. Like I don't want to. There was no roadmap. So yeah, he casually applies to NYU because he knows it's in New York and has a drama program, which LOL. And I don't know how NYU works. I don't know how people get in, but
he auditions. He does have to audition.
No, he auditions, but like it sounds like they're like, you're really bad at school, but you danced around and like did a little monologue from Oliver.
Right.
So
well, that was his like pride and joy. His big starring moment in high school was the Artful Dodger in Oliver. And if you think that that's not going to get brought up towards the end of the book again, it is.
It's yes. So he gets in, and they're like, "Bring your grades up, and you'll fine." And he's like, "Great, love that." He gets into NYU, and he's going to the Circle in the Square acting school. Okay, he's doing all the things, and he's fully living in Greenwich Village, like the classique. Just like, I'm from New York, or I'm from Jersey, moved to the city to be a star. It's kind of wild. I was like, this is literally a YA novel. This is the movie Patty Cakes.
An odd comparison, but I'll allow it.
She literally is sitting in Jersey looking over the city. She wants to come to the city. He is expelled after 2 years, but like he kind of wanted to. He was like,
right.
In his book, he's like, I needed to get into acting school so I could drop out of acting school. There you go, gal.
I do want to fill in one odd thing that's sort of, he befriends one of his high school teachers. And the first year he's living in the East Village alone, but the second year he starts subletting from this man that's like 12 years older than him, who has decided to leave his job teaching to travel the world and just ends up in Thailand for 2 years. And so he ends up living with this like roommate of his teacher, who is somebody that's a decade older than him, who doesn't want to live with him. And I just think it's such a funny, like, odd detail of being like this like 19-year-old kid living in New York City with like a 30-year-old man as your roommate who's like, leave me the fuck alone.
He's like, I'm a New York actor, actually. His first big break or major role is in 83's Class with Jacqueline Bisset. I had never seen this movie before. My jaw was on the floor when I was watching this. I could not believe the twist in this movie, I guess. Or like, I don't know if is it a twist? Is it a major plot point? I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything, but
I think in this case you should, because the movie kind of hinges on it. Like,
the whole movie is about him fucking his roommate's mom. I was gooped.
When was the first time you saw Class, Kate? Because this is also my first experience to it, but it sounded like you had seen it before in your emails.
That was one of the earlier ones that I watched at home after middle school, and I was definitely cut for cable consumption, and it's crazy that it's his first film, but obviously like knowing and learning about his life, it's like, yeah, this kind of sounds like you're tapping into your own stuff that's going on. But he's like, it's a weirdly sexy movie, but like maybe you're not supposed to feel like it's sexy, because the twist / total plot is a little icky.
Yes.
But
You
a little.
you think like in my head I was like, oh, this movie is about like a young man, trying to find his place and like, learning and like very that going to prep school, but it's just and then all of a sudden it's about him like having an affair with an older woman who surprises his roommate PS, which is Rob Lowe. This movie is just packed with young actors of the 80s that would go on to do more stuff.
John Cusack's in
John
it.
Cusack, yep. Yeah, but I didn't mention, he talks in his book about how he has this one teacher at NYU who's like, that smile is gonna get you really far, but it's gonna be like the downfall of you, because I guess what she was trying to say and what he gleaned from it was that he was relying so much on his charm. He was just, kind of, and it's funny because he talks about how his dad was the same way. He was a very charming man, was a businessman. And so it's kind of funny that, he took that from him and he was able to have that charisma. It's totally true. Like when he's on the screen, he flashes that big smile, his big blue eyes. It's like, okay, we get it.
But what's interesting about that is that I was like, yeah, you're down for, who cares? You like me and you want me to keep going. You know what I mean? So I really did want that.
It's funny too, because the process of getting this movie, it really felt like he wasn't involved in getting it. Like they recorded him on video cassette and then they basically like never called him back. And finally, like a couple weeks later, him and his begrudging roommate had come to a truce about the answering machine. And so his roommate was like, oh yeah, you got a message about some audition.
Wow.
And so what he's been able to piece together is when they brought the tape back to LA, nobody could figure out how to like rewind and fast forward it. So they just had to keep sitting through his audition over and over and over again until they were like, yeah, I guess this is the guy.
It's a twist of fate.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny because it feels like so much of his career is like, yes, this is something he really wants. Like he really wants to be an actor. He really wants to be in New York. But then the other half of it is just sort of like falling into these things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, and that seems like, the sort of thing that can only happen to a person who is so charming and, maybe doesn't even realize how much he is relying on his charm to kind of sort of skate through life. Like Louis said, it's like a YA novel.
Nothing could be more clear than that, than what happens after the movie. Like the movie comes out, it's not a huge success. And like I said, I watched it for the first time. And my problem with the film is that it's sort of exactly what you said, Louis, where it doesn't really match its own levels. Like it kind of wants to be The Graduate, but then it kind of wants to be like Porky's, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, the ending, I was like, that's it? They fight and then they're like, LOL, credits.
And Jacqueline Bisset was very upset, apparently, that they removed a lot of her scenes. Like she had a scene actually at the psychiatric hospital and everything.
Wow.
And she thought it was going to be this deeper thing about this woman. And then she realized, like, no, it's about the kids.
It's a teen comedy, babe. So sorry.
It's only money.
Yeah, well, it's my only money.
Have you ever been in love?
Yeah, I was pretty fond of that $100 bill.
Do you think there's something wrong with me?
Well, how do I know? I mean, I don't know you.
We can fix that.
But the thing that happens afterwards is, Jacqueline Bisset, by the way, and I just keep calling her that because in the book there's a photo of her and underneath it says, it's Bisset like kiss it.
Oh.
So
okay. Drag me.
But that's not against you. I always thought it was Jacqueline Bisset as well. So, but she invites him to come live with her.
Yes.
And so he like goes and stays as her and her husband, who is like a ballerina from Moscow. Like to like live in their house, and he would just like watch him exercise in the morning and then at night like help out Jacqueline like get prepared for her parties. And like,
this is so sexual.
Well,
I'm watching her ballerina husband work out in the morning and then helping her prepare for parties in the evening.
He did say there was one point where that it only happened once, but they were talking and she kissed him and then she like left the room.
Just one time, it was one of those adolescent fantasies that just happened, and that just happened.
Wow. Wow. And he's like 19, right?
Yes.
Like he's
a child. Let's get it out there.
Well, depending on what state you're in.
Yes.
Correct.
It was Los Angeles. Anything goes.
And he did you guys watch The Benniker Gang?
Yes, I did. It's I did not realize it was an after school special. I was like, this movie's awfully cheap looking for a Hollywood movie. And then I was like, oh, okay, it was literally an after school special.
Scholastic said, let's make a little movie, guys. How about that? What's funny, in the next two movies, like The Benniker Gang and Heaven Help Us, the same little girl plays his sister in both of them.
Yes.
And I was like, that's interesting. Both of these movies are basically, especially Heaven Help Us, like class, he's a young, kid in prep school, private school. Heaven Help Us just made me think like, Jesus Christ, thank God we don't live in that era. I have no idea what the fuck goes on in Catholic schools, but brutal.
I didn't rewatch Heaven Help Us. Heaven Help Us I watched years ago because I was doing a project where I watched every film mentioned in the Celluloid Closet, the famous book about queer cinema. Mm-hmm. And literally Heaven Help Us is only mentioned in the book because Kevin Dillon's character says the F word several times.
Yeah.
And so I remember watching, I was like, that's that movie. I'll skip it.
It's, I'm not mad at it. It's teens being teens in the 70s, I guess. But really, like, the big explosion comes in 1985. And this is like the sound the fucking alarm, Huns, because the Brat Pack is here. St. Elmo's Fire comes out. I had never seen this movie before.
Wow.
And I didn't know what I didn't know what I was going into. I didn't know. In my head, I was like, maybe it's about a fire department.
Oh my God.
It's a rough watch, is what I'll say.
This is very very similar story to Kate, except I grew up in a very small town in northern New York. But the latchkey kid watched whatever I want. Didn't have a lot of restrictions on it, and oftentimes, in fact, my parents would like tape things off TV and then just leave them for us to watch, like this, like St. Elmo's Fire, and which are not super age appropriate. But I also had two older sisters, and we're all 3.5 years apart, so they were more mature. But so St. Elmo's Fire is formative for me. Like, it's a movie I've seen several times. I rewatched it for this. I agree. Politically now, I'm just like, oh boy, there's a lot happening here, and I don't like a lot of it. Like, one of my friends told me that his sister felt so hard for Emilio Estevez's character, and I was like, that was he the worst? Like, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
He's a stalker in this movie. He's a
stalker, exactly.
And like, and then even though he's a stalker, they give him like the moment of like, and then he kisses her, and she's like, "Fuck, I guess I'm stuck with my boyfriend, and I could have my stalker." Poor
Andy McDowell. St. Elmo's Fire is a movie about a group of friends who just recently graduated college, and they're trying to find themselves in life. And the thing that brings them together is this bar. Is the bar called St. Elmo's? Is that the?
I think the bar is called St. Elmo's Fire.
Oh, St. Elmo's Fire. Okay.
I think the bar is called that. I don't fucking know. But they also
they show the sign.
Yeah, they show the sign, and then also at one moment he talk about like St. Elmo's Fire is like a myth or whatever. I was like, okay, great. Andrew McCarthy specifically is a writer in the movie. He writes obits and he hates it because he wants to be a real writer and find the meaning of life. And I was like, oh, babe, if only that was what writing was about. Like, I'm so mad about my day job that's like paying for my bills. It does the little Love Actually, the rope-a-dope of like, is he gay? Oh my God! Just tell me you're gay.
But he's only like everybody assumes he's gay except for the Anna Maria Horsford character who just is piecing things together. Mm-hmm. But everybody else thinks he's gay because he's just pining after one friend specifically, which is Ali Sheedy, who's like an architect in a bad marriage with Judd Nelson, and he keeps cheating on her.
They think he's pining after Sheedy's boyfriend.
Yes.
Judd Nelson, and so they're like, you're totally obsessed. That's why you don't like her. It is the Love Actually, like it.
Yeah.
And then,
oh yeah.
And
Sorry, I haven't seen Love Actually in a very long time, so
I watched it all the time.
I know
No,
you
but
do.
like, and then literally she comes over and she's like, "What are all these fucking pictures of me doing in your apartment?" And he's like, "I'm obsessed with you." They have sex because whatever the other relationship is falling apart. And then he turns full. I was like, oh, he's the normal one, I guess. But then he's like, we're moving in together. Fuck that guy. I'm like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You actually are also a fucking monster. Like, how are these people friends? It was so crazy. Watching that movie is crazy.
If Leslie would just marry me.
Marriage is gonna make you faithful.
Yes.
I'm sorry, the notion of two people spending their entire lives together was invented by people who were lucky to make it to 20 without being eaten by dinosaurs. Marriage is obsolete.
Dinosaurs are obsolete. Marriage is still around.
I did want to mention, as I mentioned earlier, Anna Maria Horsford is in this movie. She plays a sex worker who like always sees him on the street and is like, "You never come on to me, so you must be gay." We've had them on the show before, but the very great podcast you might know her from interviewed her, and they asked about working on this movie, and she talked about how there's a scene where he hands her a bottle of wine that he's been drinking of, and she wipes the top of it before sipping out of it. And Joel Schumacher, who directed this film, was like, "Why would she do that? She's a prostitute." And Anna Maria Horsford was like, sex workers like to keep clean too.
Yeah.
And it blew his mind.
Fucking Joel Schumacher.
There's another great anecdote for the book about them on set, because he was friends with Rob Lowe. Rob Lowe was like the only member of the Brat Pack that he was friends with. And so he walks by Rob Lowe's trailer, and Rob Lowe is watching himself eat in front of the mirror. And so he just like shouts like, "Admiring yourself, Bobby?" And Joel Schumacher, who he did not know was behind him, just goes, "Wouldn't you?"
Oh. Joel Schumacher is such a horny man. Good for him. I'm not mad. I am mad at this movie, but I am sure that it was very. It's like the classic John Hughes thing, like taking young people seriously, delving into like their wants and needs. But like this movie is like every person has an issue, and it is very paper thin. And it's like, this girl doesn't like the way she looks. This girl, I don't know.
Demi Moore's bad with money, so she's gonna kill herself by opening all the windows.
Right. I was like, is this an emergency? She's gonna die in there. I was like, okay. I thought it was interesting, the Judd Nelson character or role. He's like the college Democrats president, and then, oh no, now he has to go work for a Republican. I was like, okay, cool.
It's like Joel Schumacher, like straight people fan fiction. That's
Yes.
the way we talk about it at home, where it's like Joel Schumacher is like, how do all these straight people relate to each other? And it's like, yeah, they just graduated from college, so they're all 22, but they're also like 45 years old. The issues that they have are just, they're not the issues that I think 22-year-olds have today, or even 10, 15 years ago. And yeah, everyone has their own little boxed in issue, and they've got to figure it out together.
Well, it's like almost as if, I think about a lot how John Hughes movies and like, St. Elmo's Fire, like
I do want to say, and not to cut you off, but I do want to say, like, I just to reiterate, like, this is the most John Hughes movie that he didn't have anything to do with at all.
Right.
Like, he is not here, but it does feel like that.
It's like these movies were writing like the script for like Americana, in the 80s. It was like, oh, this is what life post-college is supposed to look like, relationships. And I think, we'll see that going forward in Pretty in Pink. Like, people were like, oh, this is what high school and prom and like relationships are supposed to look like. And I think for a lot of, elder millennials, these were the blueprints. And that's why I think for a lot of people who are queer, Black, brown, it's like, what is the blueprint? We don't have anything, because these were so front and center. But Pretty in Pink, we talked about earlier, was his first leading role. It was his fourth movie. He said it was his first time he's ever gone to a Hollywood premiere.
About 2/3 of the way back in the packed theater, I took a seat as near the aisle as I could get. Not long after the lights went down and the opening credits began, I mumbled apologies as I climbed over several sets of knees and darted up the aisle. A few stragglers were getting their free popcorn in the lobby as I pushed open the glass door and lunged out into the cool late January night. The red carpet, site of such excitement just a short while earlier, was deserted. In my ill-fitting black blazer and skinny tie, I searched up and down Hollywood Boulevard, looking for a place to hide.
Andrew, did you actually go to your high school prom?
No.
No? Why not?
I couldn't get a date.
Couldn't get a date. Later on.
Sad tale that I'd really like to talk about. No, it just wasn't a big deal, I guess.
He hated it. He got drunk instead. I think a big part of Andrew's career would talk about is like him feeling like an imposter, like he didn't belong. He was kind of like this introverted, shy guy, which you see a lot on screen. But I watched the Jane Pauley Sunday morning, whatever CBS interview that he did. And he's like talking about how he took a picture with like the Paramount stars for like their 75th birthday.
It's a pretty famous picture.
And he's like, Tom Cruise is in the middle, wearing a red sweater, looking so confident. And he was like, meanwhile, I'm in the corner, like cowering. I was like, I would never be Tom Cruise. I was just never that guy. And I was like, oh.
And there's Tom Cruise in a bright red sweater, center third row, standing there like this in the photo. And I just go, wow, I just never was that guy. I could never in a million years been in that red sweater. Standing in the third row. I'm not that person. I didn't ever want to be that person.
You know, we keep talking about luck, and it is sort of that. You mentioned next thing he does Pretty in Pink, and he goes to audition for that. He doesn't think he did well, but he learns later that, as you mentioned before too, that Molly Ringwald it was like a reading with actual Molly Ringwald and John Hughes in the background. Once again, John Hughes did not direct Pretty in Pink, but he did write it and he produced it. And he had a big hand in everything. Apparently, he was often rewriting on the set but he goes and leaves, and Molly Ringwald's like, that's who I would fall in love with.
They weren't interested in me auditioning for the part because it was written for a square-jawed, hulking quarterback stud dude. And I read with Molly, and they went, okay, thank you. And when I walked out, Molly, turned to John Hughes and said, that's the guy. And John Hughes is like, that wimp? And he's like, no, he's sensitive, he's poetic. That's the kind of guy I'd fall for. That changed my life. Molly changed my life.
LOL.
He wanted another Jake Ryan. Like, he wanted another 16 Candles that's sort of like really masculine looking. And so he decides to take the chance. And it's funny because Andrew McCarthy, we talked a little bit in the John Hughes episode about how John Cryer felt really alienated on the set because he was gregarious and outgoing, and Molly Ringwald and Andrew McCarthy weren't. Andrew McCarthy feels the same way, but from the opposite end. He's like, I didn't really talk to anybody on the set. I was mean to John Cryer because he was so outgoing. And he's like, we made up sense, but like I was a dick to him. He's like, John Hughes spoke to me twice. John Hughes gave me the script of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and I told him it was great, and then he didn't talk to me. And then he called me after we made the movie and sent me the script of Some Kind of Wonderful, and I was like, no, we just made this movie, and then he never spoke to me again.
Yeah.
And so,
yikes.
So for like as big of a career launch as it is, and it is a big career launch, Pretty in Pink, like he like every step that could have like launched him into that Tom Cruise role, like when he was just kind of like, no, turn and push, and push.
What do you guys make of him being the like complicated rich guy? Because I think Molly Ringwald is really good in the movie.
Yeah.
Andrew is fine. I think he's doing his Andrew thing, sensitive guy,
I think, and I wanted to talk about this later, hint, hint. I think it's very clearly trying to put him into a box that he, like the Jake Ryan box, very masculine, like would play football, would be that kind of guy. And that's not what Molly wanted, but you can see like that tension on screen in a way that I don't think works, because the movie wants him to be one kind of guy and he's so not that guy. You see the moments where like, oh, okay, yeah, but it still doesn't work. And it is funny that then he John Hughes was like, oh, read Some Kind of Wonderful, which corrects a lot of the mistakes that Pretty in Pink makes. So yeah, it is sort of the same film, but it corrects a lot of mistakes that Pretty in Pink made. And that I think, as I said, I grew up and I had a huge crush on Andrew McCarthy, and especially in Pretty in Pink, but revisiting it and thinking more about it the last couple of weeks leading up to this, I'm just like, it doesn't work. It really doesn't work in so many different ways. And it doesn't work because I think he's still trying so hard to actually be himself. But the movie doesn't want that of him.
Right. He's so uncomfortable.
He looks insane in the reshot ending. There's two reasons he looks insane. But the first reason is because his eyes are wide the whole time when he's just like, we're gonna end up together, she should run. I pitched in our John Hughes episode that the real ending of that movie is she should be like, fuck you both, I'm out of here, and leave herself and go party with Annie Potts. But the other problem is like, obviously most people know this, the original ending of Pretty in Pink is she ends up with Ducky, and a lot of test audiences hated that. John Hughes was like, they don't like it, she ends up with Blaine. And so they have to reshoot this ending. They had to pull him from a Broadway show he was doing at the time, which was a Vietnam War drama called The Boys of Winter, which he said was also being rewritten daily. So he didn't mind the break from that. And they flew him back to LA, but he had shaved his head. So they slap a wig on him. And let me tell you, in the Blu-ray of this, you can see the lace. You can. Oh, good. Not great. That ending doesn't work. It truly doesn't. And I get why John Hughes, being the kind of people pleaser that he was, would want to redo that so the ending worked for a teenage audience, but it doesn't.
You told me you couldn't believe in somebody who didn't believe in you. I believed in you. Always believed in you. You just didn't believe in me. I love you.
It's like around this time, the Brat Pack, like New York Magazine is what labels the group as the Brat Pack. Famously, he was airbrushed off of a photo that it's a picture, I believe, from St. Elmo's Fire.
Yes.
And it's Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez,
Judd Nelson.
And like there's a gaping hole where Andrew McCarthy is that they just airbrushed out. And he says, at first I was really mad that I was like, oh, why'd they airbrush me? And then like when you read the story, he's like, thank God they airbrushed me because the story is, not complimentary. It was very much like these fucking punk kids who think they're running Hollywood.
But he was still Brat Pack by proxy. And he does bring up a really interesting point is, there were many projects that they probably could have done together that would have been interesting, that all of them sort of instantly became toxic. Yeah. And so they never would have, there was a movie that he was going to be in with Emilio Estevez, and Emilio Estevez asked for him to be recast. He said he's literally never spoken to Emilio Estevez or Judd Nelson since the ending of the shooting of St. Elmo's Fire. And so this Brat Pack myth, this idea that it was like all these Hollywood teens that were hanging out together, the Demi Moores, the Molly Ringwalds, that it just wasn't reality. But it was the perceived reality due to this very famous article.
If you were a New York actor, you were a New York actor. But the second the Brat Pack happened, that went out the window when I was Brat Packer.
we received it, or I did anyway. It's this sort of boxing in kind of negative thing. And to realize how over the years and decades that it's gone on, that it is looked at with as an iconically affectionate term now. Those movies represent, and it's not even the movies so much, or me so much, it's the movies represent people who watch them, their youth, and they look back upon their own youth, right. Such glassy-eyed, watery-eyed affection. It's that moment when you're 20 years old and the world is cusping and you are just out there for the first time and it's let me at it. And I'm like an avatar for people of their youth.
87, we got Mannequin, which is a full fever dream.
He says in his book he doesn't believe Mannequin would be made today. Has he seen the movies we make today?
This has Netflix written all over it, babe.
100%. That's what I was like. I'm shocked Netflix hasn't remade this movie.
Where's the Addison Rae starring Mannequin, where she is, or maybe it's a boy Mannequin this time?
And be man.
It can. Yeah. I forgot that this movie starts with her as an Egyptian princess or whatever. And
Kim
like
Cattrall.
Yeah.
Very famously Egyptian.
Clearly.
But I was like, oh, they're doing bits because they're fully giving the full Valley Girl aesthetic and vibe, but they're like, but Egypt. And I was like, that's how, because as I started the movie, I was like, I forgot why the mannequin is magic. And I was like, oh, the mannequin isn't magic. It's actually an Egyptian princess or whatever. And the gods have given her time travel skills to find a husband or something.
You know, that makes it sound like you didn't watch hard enough, but that's literally the looseness of the film, because I rewatched it last night. I made Dan sit through it because I was like, you know what? Mannequin was a great movie when I was a kid. Yes. It is not. It's not
as a youth, it's fun. It's I love the idea that like the gay friend who is played by
Hollywood and Montrose.
Yes. He's like, I'm gay, so I don't care that you're fucking a doll. Like, that's the whole vibe. It's very much like, oh, sweetie, I don't want to get into what you're doing. At least you're finding love. Like, it's very much like, he understands because he's queer. It's like, what?
I will give them this. It is funny that they allow Andrew McCarthy to be like, because he's the good guy, he's not judgmental about it. Because when the security guard at this mannequin, as Louis said, is literally about Kim Cattrall coming to life as a mannequin and work. It's at this
department
store. And,
a wonderful looking department store. I'll say.
Oh my God,
it's massive.
It's a real. Gorgeous. It's in Philadelphia. They still have it. They still have that organ. It's the largest organ in the United States of America.
What?
Yeah, it's now a Macy's. And they shot the evil department store at the Boscovs. And Dan was like, do you think they told the Boscovs people that they were the evil department store?
Yeah, bad.
They were just like the hip department store. That was like the one the teens went to.
Yeah.
They were
the
like,
young
we got
one.
neon signs.
Mm-hmm. And hot people working here.
But when he's confronted with the security guard, because he works overnights because he's a stock boy, when he's confronted by the security guard instantly goes homophobic. And he's just like, well, you're a bigot. Bye.
Yeah,
and so I do appreciate that. But then literally like 30 minutes later, they just have an innocuous side character call Hollywood a fairy with no repercussions. And I was just like, did she just say fairy?
Yeah.
So like,
I will say there's a lot of movies where, maybe not a lot, but like just because I was watching them so quickly, but like where he's the one who stands up to the homophobia. He is the one who says, those are my gay friends, okay? Leave them alone. We're weird.
Ow! Well, roll over Bill Shakespeare. That is the sweetest sentiment these ears have ever heard.
No. I was rehearsing a play.
I always find it best not to explain. It adds a certain mystique to one's reputation.
No. I'm a regular kind of guy, okay?
Don't disappoint me. When you're finished with your conversation, please bring her to window number 3.
Sure, you got it.
He does talk about that in his book back when he was at NYU before he was ever so unceremoniously kicked out. And by the way, we should mention NYU did offer to reinstate him after he made class. And they were like, we'll just call that like a summer program. And he was, but you still have to pay your tuition.
Fuck off.
Yep.
Fuck off.
But he mentions back when he was in NYU, he had his first exposure to a gay student, and he was a student that would go out and party all the time, and he invited him to a Broadway show, and he was like too dumb to realize it was a date. So at the end of the night, the other guy was like, well, can't blame me for trying, sort of
love that.
But then like he said he disappeared that summer, and then he found out he had to go home because he was sick, and then he died, and they didn't have the word for it back then, which was AIDS.
Fucking
and so
horrible.
I like that he had those experiences because I think they informed who Andrew McCarthy is. So, I mean, I know he doesn't have much hand in the scripting of these movies, and we are still talking about a very silly movie like Mannequin, but I would like to imagine he was like, no, I'm going to be the guy that's like, there's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah. Also, I mean, like, Mannequin is just silly fun. Like, it's kooky.
Harmless.
It's very harmless, inoffensive. And, like, iconically, you know, when she's like about to be shredded in like the mulch machine. Like, it's fun. Like, it's a perfect teen movie. 1987 was a kind of a busy year for him. The next movie we should really talk about though is Less Than Zero.
Yes.
Which is the Bret Easton Ellis book, you know, that was made, which is most famous probably for Robert Downey Jr., who is incredible in it. I had never seen it, but watched it and was just like, oh my God, like, this is an aggressive movie. Apparently, you know, like, the book is a lot darker. They had to change a lot. The studio really wanted to sanitize it for a broader audience. So it kind of takes the teeth out of it, but like Robert Downey Jr. is so good in it that you still get like the real pain of addiction. I don't know if I could say a lot for Andrew's performance in this. You know, I think
I feel bad. Like both him and I really like Jamie Gertz. I like Jamie Gertz a lot. I think they're both pretty bad in this movie.
They're just totally overshadowed by RDJ, who's like, just explosive.
Yeah. I think specifically her, to me, I was like, what are some choices you're making here, babe? Like, just like acting wise. But if you don't know, Less Than Zero is about, again, three friends who have just graduated from college or from high school. They all kind of go their separate ways. RDJ wants to be like a music producer, ends up becoming an addict. Their girlfriend, calls Andrew McCarthy back because they need help, you know, and I will say that like I felt connected to this, and I've gotten that call before, you know, and it felt like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do? You know, like how much responsibility does someone have to, you know, helping someone who doesn't know that they need help or doesn't want help? It's a very intense movie, and I think also like this, now we're getting to the late 80s. I think this was kind of Hollywood looking back and being like, it's been pretty fucking rough. You know, people were just like doing coke all the fucking time. And like, you know, and I was waiting for the gay shit. I knew it was coming. I was like, in my heart, I was like, there is going to be a scene where he is, you know, having sex for drugs with a man. And I was like, it's getting pretty late, and boop, right on time. I was like, and there's Robert Downey Jr. in front of a man with his pants off. But yeah,
which is funny because once again, this is the tame version.
This is the tame version.
Yeah, the book is much more explicit.
I was looking up like how it was received. It was received pretty negatively, but I thought it was actually pretty effective. I'm not mad at it. I don't think it's like a excellent movie, but like on the back of Robert Downey Jr. alone, it's kind of incredible.
You want to talk about it?
No.
You want to fight?
Nope. Congratulations. I mean, this is the way it's supposed to be. Turnabout is fair play. Blair was good to me, you know. I was lonely and I needed somebody. You know, she was there. It was nice. It wasn't exactly the World Series of love, though. Oh, this is my club. Check me out. I'm gonna make a serious comeback.
Great.
Yeah. And I'll sneak in your back door and take Blair away when you least expect it. This will just go on for years.
What?
I also do want to say that this is the third and final film he'll do with James Spader.
Yes.
Because James Spader plays his like kind of begrudging ally in Pretty in Pink. Like James Spader's the real asshole in Pretty in Pink.
Yeah.
But Blaine's like friends with him. And then he's the enemy in Mannequin. He's like the plant inside the store who actually works for the rival store. And then in this, he's the drug dealer who starts selling Robert Downey Jr. for sex.
Right.
And I think James Spader's really excellent in all three of these movies.
He's good.
And I will say, like, watching these movies, I was like, we need to do a James Spader episode at some point.
I was going to say, like, you guys should do that because that's another fascinating career.
Yeah, very much so.
I was like, James Spader had evil 80s down, okay? Like, he knew everything to do. Okay, so, you know, as the late 80s kind of comes to an end. He does Kansas, Fresh Horses, a reteaming with Molly Ringwald, which, oh boy.
Yeah.
I was like, why are these horses fresh?
A lot of accent work, a lot of accents going on in that.
Oh yeah.
I felt so bad because that movie felt to me like a like a passion project gone wrong, because it was directed by the guy who wrote the play, and I think it never really gets out of that mode about play mode. And also I do think, and once again, this is not me trying to shit on actresses, because I like Molly Ringwald and I think she's been good in many things. Not good
She's
here.
not good here. No.
And I actually didn't think McCarthy was that bad. You know who the standout is, though, is Ben Stiller.
Ben Stiller, a tiny young Ben Stiller. I also like, who is the other woman in this that she has grown up to be a famous actress? Molly Hagan. First of all, she's gorgeous and just so effortless. I was like, that was kind of the joy of watching these movies from the 80s. I was like, some of these actresses or actors who haven't like blown up, but like have been steadily working. I'm like, oh, it's so cool to like see where they started. You know, his next like big thing like of note would have to be Weekend at Bernie's in '89. What a goofball ride of a movie. Just silly Billy. I don't know where this weekend is, but I was like, is this straight Fire Island? Where?
It's like fake Hampton.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's supposed to be the Hamptons, but like
okay. I fully was like, oh, this is Fire Island, but straights. Parties every day, people coming and going, just like drugs, sex, whatever.
Yeah, a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
Weekend at Bernie's is him and Jonathan Silverman, and they're two guys that work for a company, and Jonathan Silverman's the straight-laced guy who can't get the girl, and Andrew McCarthy's the wild guy who hates his job, and they uncover some accounting fraud, and their boss Bernie decides to have them killed. but
it happened. It's like, fire them? No, murder.
And so he invites them over to his house in the Hamptons for the weekend, but unfortunately his mob connection sees that he's been fucking his girlfriend and decides to murder him instead. And chaos ensues from there, and they have to pretend Bernie is alive for the next less than 24 hours. And my brain, and my like childhood brain, I saw this movie at the drive-in when I was a kid. In my childhood brain, I was like, wow, they keep him alive for like a month. But no, it's literally like Friday night.
It's a weekend.
It's a weekend. Yeah. It's not even a full weekend. It's like...
What's wild is that in my head, again, like Mannequin, I remember watching this movie as a kid, but like Mannequin, I was like, why is he dead? I don't know why he's dead. In my head, I was like, this is just a movie where they have to like puppet the guy around. And in my head, I was like, there's no reason for it. It's just a funny bit. I will say the guy who plays Bernie is very good at being a puppet.
Yes.
Oscar. Should have gotten nominated for an Oscar.
Yes.
The things that he does with his body are just incredible.
That's comedy, babe.
The like weird half smile he maintains throughout most of the movie. I was like, Terry Kaiser is the one that plays it. I was just like, how? How is he not breaking character? But yeah, this was a lot of... Andrew McCarthy like notes this as also being like the thing that sort of introduces him to... he's always been curious about behind the scenes, and he's always asked like cinematographers about the camera and lenses and everything, but this was where he got to really play that. And even so much so that Ted Kochev, who apparently was kind of an asshole, like would yell at extras over his megaphone and everything, let him direct a scene. And so there's a scene in the movie where Jonathan Silverman brings a woman back to his apartment, and it's secretly his parents' apartment, and his dad walks in his underwear. That's the director. And so the director was like, I don't want to direct myself. So Andrew McCarthy directed that entire scene.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Love that. Tidbits.
It's a funny scene too.
It's a funny scene.
That's a very funny scene.
It's a very funny, and actually hats off to Ted Kochev. Obviously don't fucking yell at your employees, but he's very funny in that scene for not being an actor.
Yeah. I would say after Weekend at Bernie's, it gets weird.
It gets weird. It's hard. This is the first actor we've ever done who I think like was very hot for a brief amount of time, and then so like basically like he still works, but like as the 90s goes on, it gets more and more like direct to video, HBO original movie, like
and I think also
TV movies.
And Kate and Gavin, you probably might know more than me, like culturally, as far as movies went, like in the 90s was when like indies were really blowing up, you know, and I feel like, you know, because he talks about how he was such a New York actor, he was East Coast, and how uncomfortable the West Coast was, but because he got sucked into the Brat Pack of it all, like it took him like there are a couple of things here and there I'm like, oh, this is like an indie 90s New York film, but like anyone who's casting him was like, you can't be this guy, you are Hollywood guy. You are, LA. And so he has a very kind of kooky run, especially also he's growing up now. He can no longer play like the young, freshly, like how many times was it? I just got out of college. I just got out of high school. Those days are kind of coming to an end. So
I do think you have a solid point there too about the idea of, I hadn't thought about that. Like, yeah, he very much represents like a Hollywood ideal, as much as he, when you go back to Pretty in Pink, didn't think that he fit that ideal. Like, he was like a Hollywood leading man. And so it was not like, please come star in our indie film. Yeah, because that's so interesting. I read that entire book and didn't even put that together. Because the next thing he did, like 1990s, he goes to Europe to work with Claude Chabrol on Quiet Days of Clicky, and like his agent was like, "Don't do this. Careers, like, people end their careers in Europe. They don't start their careers in Europe." And honestly, his agent was right.
Yeah, I didn't watch Quiet Days and Clicky. The next thing I saw was Year of the Gun.
Yeah.
Which to me feels like probably his agent being like, you're a man of a certain age now and you need to be an action thriller guy now. Right. Like, that's the next step if you're going to do the Tom Cruise lane. Unfortunately, Year of the Gun is so bad.
Just like so many of those movies in this time period, it feels like, yes, he's trying that. Like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to be the action guy, or like, no, I'm going to do like sort of a kind of an erotic thriller.
Yes.
Just like trying and it not working.
The amount of movies where women are just thrown around half naked, fully naked, and he's just there like pawing at them. And I was like, my God, like they all started to run together, honestly. I told Gavin this earlier. I watched Escape Plan, and then 2 days later, I clicked on it to watch. I was like, oh, what's this movie? And I was like, wait, I saw this movie already.
Yeah, Escape Clause. That's
Escape Clause.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Escape Plan, different. Sylvester Stallone. I will say, I can't remember if he mentions this briefly in the book Year of the Gun, that John Frankenheimer like was yelling at him about like not having the right chemistry with Sharon Stone, but I know that he mentions it in St. Elmo's Fire with Joel Schumacher, that like Joel Schumacher was like, make these sex scenes hotter with Ali Sheedy, and like he snapped at one point like, what would you know about having sex with a woman? And Joel Schumacher was like, nope. Like, how dare you?
Dang.
So, but like, I think that also adds to it is there is, you watch Year of the Gun and he does have these scenes with Sharon Stone. You watch Escape Clause and there's all these sex scenes. It's awkward. It's not, awkward. And he is a really great looking guy. He's hot, but like, it's not a sexual chemistry thing.
I think he actually has a lot of sexual, just like, charisma, and I think it's not that it's unbelievable, it's just like the way these movies are shot, and it feels so exploitative to the women. Like, the male gaze is just like so aggressive. I think the hottest scenes in Year of the Gun, which is not a hot movie, are literally just him and Sharon Stone kind of like bantering back and forth. Sharon Stone, who's incredible, has just so much magnetic energy. But Year of the Gun is just like, again, one of those movies that's like, journalism is crazy. And she's like, fucking like, there's people literally shooting guns at her. And she's like, click, 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 click. I'm like, ma'am, that's a film camera. You do not have 10,000. Like, what are you talking about? This is a movie that really wants to say something about war and the media.
Yeah.
But like, it's all wrong. It's just so wrong.
You were never indicted in the bombing in New York. Why not?
Because I wasn't guilty.
Sure.
Look, I had known somebody who was involved. Peter Weiss. He was in 2 of my classes. We were friends. He lived in an apartment with 6 other people, so sometimes he'd come over to my place and crash. The FBI got pictures of us together, Peter going in and out of the apartment. What happened to Peter? Who he was. Look, Allison, I am not and never have been a revolutionary.
Yeah. Well, the book you're writing is not and never will be about spaghetti.
We get a Weekend at Bernie's 2.
To which he says in his book, the less said about that, the better. And I agree.
He's in the Joy Luck Club. I think 1994, specifically Dead Funny, is a bright spot that I would like to mention, just because I saw this poster and I thought, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God. And then come to find that it's actually, you know, an indie little New York movie starring Elizabeth Pena, who is so good.
She's very good.
Talk about hot. Them two, just like, I was just imagining, like, he's, you know, been in the biz. He's out of, you know, the brat pack of it all. He's making this movie that, like, literally only came out on VHS. It's never been released on DVD. You can find it online, but it literally is a bootleg of a VHS.
Yeah.
If he feels so comfortable, if he feels like he can finally, like, let his hair down and just, like, not worry about being a star, he's just being a fucking weirdo. This movie is weird and funny. Allison Janney's in this. Like, it's a lot of Broadway, New York theater gals.
Just to give, like, a quick, essentially, Elizabeth Pena comes home and finds her boyfriend dead, played by Andrew McCarthy, dead on the kitchen table with a katana sword through him. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to piece together what happened, and you find out that they had this really volatile relationship because he kind of kept secrets from her, but he was also constantly pranking her, and he had this very dark sense of humor. So all of her friends, whenever she's like, he's dead, are like, oh, he's such a kidder. And I think the real lesson of this movie is practical jokes suck.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
But he appears mostly in flashbacks, and he's very good. He's very funny, good. And yeah, it's I liked, for the most part. When I got to the end, I was like, oh well, this is the end I thought we would get to, and I don't want to spoil it, but for me, that's what turned me against a little bit. But Elizabeth Pena is very good in it. Also, you mentioned Allison Janney in a small role, and also Bai Ling in a really small role.
It's a little bit of a cruel movie, but I think that was like New York theater, because it's based on a play. I also watched Night of the Running Man, which was a direct-to-video release. You know, it's running around, guns shooting girlies for no reason, fucking.
But between the two direct-to-video releases of that year, I watched Dream Man.
I saw Dream Man. Yeah.
And Dream Man feels like a pilot for a TV show about a psychic cop. Mm-hmm. But I will give this because this is a movie most of our audience is probably never going to watch. He's the villain in the movie, and he's very good at it.
Yes.
And I do wish he got the chance to play more villains in his time.
I don't want to disparage the leading actress, but it feels for so much of it I'm like, oh, she's trying very hard to be Pamela Anderson. Like, she's just Pamela Anderson in light. And it's just, and her like visions and psychic powers while she's a cop. It is I'm like, okay, the CW will order 12 episodes. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. You're at least getting a season.
What do you do?
I'm a cop.
Were you and your wife together last night?
I did not kill my wife.
Not a great movie. I forgot to mention, I did watch Only You in 1992 with him and Helen Hunt. I think they're so fun together.
It's cute.
That was the first movie I watched, and I forgot about it.
I was like, when I was watching this, I was like, he's had so many leading ladies, you know, like all the girlies of the 80s and 90s. I think him and Helen Hunt together felt like the most like adult and like, you know, real. I think that's just like because she's so good, you know, also.
I'll also give props to, and I feel like I maybe haven't seen her in enough movies, but I specifically have seen her in a lot of movies from this era, Kelly Preston, and I really thought she was actually very good at basically playing live action Betty Boop.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, take me somewhere.
Yeah. Like, baby, I don't have any clothes.
Can I be honest with you?
Please do.
You have hair.
Yeah.
And incredibly sexy eyes.
Yeah, 2 of them.
I feel...
What? What do you feel?
Very attracted to you.
Really?
Yeah, I feel an incredible amount of electricity between us.
I think that's just the alcohol talking.
Oh, I promise you, I am not the least bit drunk.
Okay.
Whoa!
You know, you're in no position at this point to be attracted to another man. It's too soon. You're too fragile. I couldn't do nothing.
Don't you find me attractive?
Oh, God. I'm sure you get catcalls from priests. It's just...
There's a flame burning inside me, and I need your flesh to soothe the fever.
How could you do that?
He kind of like is in this rom-com. It's either he's like doing rom-com stuff or like action erotic thriller stuff.
Yeah.
None of them are really landing. Nothing is really hitting as hard as, you know, the Brat Pack era stuff, which is a shame. You know, the further and further away we get from the late 80s, the more chaotic it gets. You know, he does a couple HBO movies.
Stag, which I just want to mention because Stag comes out in 1997. We did a Cameron Diaz episode where we talked about Very Bad Things. Very Bad Things is a movie that completely rips Stag off. And I will give Stag the one credit it deserves, which is it's a much better version of Very Bad Things, but no one remembers it because it was like an HBO movie. But he's very good he's also quite villainous in the movie, and he wears like fake teeth. They're like really rotted because he's a drug dealer, and he has like a ponytail, but he's like the real badass, like evil guy in that movie. And I was like, this is a mode I like you in.
Everyone in this room will be accessory after the fact.
All right, take 8 as a minimum, cut it in half with parole, time off for good behavior.
Still 4 years.
Yeah, well, I don't have 4 years to give from my life.
Neither did she.
4 years. Could be a lot fucking worse, especially if you're on parole.
Oh my God, you're on parole?
I sell drugs, Timon.
Yeah, he's good at being bad, and I think it's because he's got such a baby face.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like fun seeing him play opposite. I'm like going through this list now being like, did I watch any of these fucking movies? I started watching
a weird stretch. Weird.
I started watching New Waterford Girl and I was like, I can't do this. I was like, no. I wish I would have seen To Be Perfectly Honest, just because it sounds so fucking chaotic.
I watched it. It's terrible. It's like the wraparound story is Princess Bride. It's Andrew McCarthy telling his kid a story, and it turns out that story is like about embezzlement.
Ooh.
And it's like him and
it's love embezzlement.
Yes.
Everyone knows that.
And it's like him and a business partner, and they have this idea, and it's just all really bad. And there's like lots of like odd Wizard of Oz references in it, and poor John Turturro, who deserves better than this, and Ada Turturro, his cousin, who deserves better than this. And yeah, the less I could say about To Be Perfectly Honest, I wish I could, because it was so bad.
But yeah, it's clear, you know, he is I don't think he likes acting anymore at this point. I don't know that he's finding much joy. And
I think, and he doesn't, like, his book very much ends in the 80s. And I think that's probably smart on his part, because if he really said what he wanted to say about his profession, he would there's probably a great book to be written about the 90s, let's just say. But like, really, he does move into directing and whatnot. I did see a couple more, like, I've seen The Good Guy before.
Yeah, same.
Alexis Bledel film that nobody has seen. And I watched Camp Hell, which is this cheap horror movie he did, and I watched The Brooklyn Brothers Beat the Best, which I don't know. But that was 2011. He does this movie in 2019. He sort of comes out of like acting film retirement. I could not find this film. It's called Finding Julia. It has an amazing reputation online. Have you seen this film, Kate?
I have not. I am aware of its reputation online. You read a single sentence about it and it's like, I don't understand what this is. I would love to see it because I cannot picture the tone of this film.
What is the reputation?
The reputation is that it is so poorly made that the audio track is 4 frames off, and that's on the released version. Like, you can look up people seeing it in New York City when it came out and being like, what is this? And like, I don't know. It was a very cheap film. It was supposed to be introducing an Asian actress, Julia.
Ha Fong.
Yeah, Ha Fong. It was supposed to be like her first big American film. Andrew McCarthy was playing her father. Richard Chamberlain apparently is in it. Ancient Richard Chamberlain. And it's just supposed to be a pure disaster. I don't know what caused him to come out of sort of like semi-film acting retirement to do this movie. I've found very little information about the actual making of this film. If anybody can find this movie, please send it my way. I would love nothing more than to watch it. But literally, like, I think his first real directing gig is on Gossip Girl.
Love that. He's a New York girl through and through.
Exactly. He does do a short film that he both wrote and directed in 2004 called News for the Church. But like his first like big like not for him is Gossip Girl, and from there he becomes a big TV director. He does a lot of Orange is the New Black. In fact, he even mentions in his book that when his agent told him that Netflix was going to drop the entire season, the first season, online all at once, he was like, "That's stupid. No one's ever going to watch that." And so he's like, "Well, I was wrong about that." He does Turn. He does The Blacklist with his friend James Spader. He's done 20 episodes of The Blacklist.
Wow.
So like clearly that's worked out for him. He did Good Girls both as a director and then as a reoccurring character. And so I think he is finding a lot more comfort and a lot more interest in being behind the scenes. As you guys mentioned up top too, he's also become a travel writer. He decided that travel was what really saved him because he was having a huge alcohol problem during the late half of his 80s career, and in the early 90s he went to rehab and he said he went to detox and then went into rehab, but had forgot to mention that he was also addicted to pills, so he had a seizure the second day there and had to go back to detox. And then, he came out of it, but then he realized, like, I have this love of travel. He starts writing travel guides. He starts working for travel magazines. And people are like, that's this Andrew McCarthy? But he writes a book about that. He gets back into the business through directing. So it's not like he has this traumatic career, but it's just like, we watch somebody's star fade so fast, and it's such an interesting, weird thing, especially for the conceit of this show.
I stumbled into that. Traveling changed my life, and so I started writing about it, and it sort of took on a life of its own and became this second career, and it has been an amazing journey for that.
And I love though that, like, it's not like he was like, oh, I'm just gonna start like he was writing for National Geographic, Afar magazine. Like, he's writing books about specific like places in Ireland. Like, when you find stuff like that, it's like, oh, this is someone who's passionate about this. So he's been sober since 1992. He talks about in his book about his relationship to Carol Schneider, who was his like college sweetheart. They like got married 20 years after they had met. They had a child, but then they got divorced. And now he is married to an Irish writer and director. So he has 3 kids, 2 from the second marriage and 1 for the first. So that's his kind of personal life. He definitely, he talked in interviews about how he understands when actors are anxious or because he's like, I have all of anxious tendencies as an actor. I know them all. And so when I see them on set, it's really easy for me to like disarm them. He's like, being a director is stressful, but I'd rather be stressed out than anxious.
I have a good eye for the truth when I see it. You know what I mean? So that's what I have as a director, is I can know, and I know how to talk to you quickly to get you sort of back on track. So I think I understand that, and I know the need for that as an actor. Like when directors often go, cut, one more. First thing here as an actor is, oh, I failed. I always go, cut, good, let's go again. Go, good, okay, I'm okay. It's because instantly when you're an actor, you are in that vulnerable, open, childlike spot. And they say, cut, you close up quick. And if you hear the first thing you hear is negative, last thing you can be an actor is tense. So the thing you want to be relaxation. Laurence Olivier said the most important thing in acting is relaxation. So if I'm open and relaxed, so I go, cut, great, that's really nice. We're just going to go one more, keep rolling. Here we go, ready, and go. I'm still right in the mode, as opposed to, cut, yeah, one more. Okay, obviously I didn't do it right.
So he's so much more comfortable behind the camera. And I don't know that he has any interest in acting anymore. He wrote his book about the 80s because probably people kept fucking asking him about it. And Rob Lowe put out a book at the same time. So I don't know, whatever.
I wonder if he's only interested in acting if his name will help whatever the project he believes in.
Right.
And so that may be why it was less and less too in the 2000s, because he's probably does get offered a heck ton of these like direct to video stuff that he sort of did in the late 90s and is kind of like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Once again, no idea where the Finding Julia stuff came from.
His good friend Ha Wang.
He's never been nominated for any major award, but Mannequin was nominated for Best Original Song for at the Oscars.
So there's
Oscar
that.
nominee Mannequin.
Oscar nominee Mannequin.
There you go. Incredible. All right. Let's get into our picks. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way first, and let's get into our 1-star reviews. Kate, as our guest, you have the very prestigious chance to go first and tell us what was your 1-star review.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I do think it's Pretty in Pink, which I think is an unexpected pick, but it is something that I've thought about for many years, considering, you know, when I first saw the film and seeing it since and watching it, you know, sort of midway through lockdown and showing it to one of our friends. It's just like I think so much of his career, you know, the early side, we're talking about the luck aspect, but it's him trying to figure out who he is and how to make that come out in his career choices. And it's just funny to watch Pretty in Pink and just be like, this movie doesn't want you to be who you are. And when you're a teenager and you watch it, you're like, oh yes, of course she's going to go for the dreamy rich boy. But it's like, it as Gavin said, it just doesn't work.
Yep.
And I think it would be a different film if there was like more of a Jake Ryan type in that role as Blaine.
That's not a name. That's a major appliance.
Blaine. And I mean, I think it's obviously it paved the way for his career for better or for worse. And I would love to hear how he reflects on it now. But I think it was a bad match, but good timing.
Yeah.
Strangely, yeah.
So it was right place, wrong time. Wrong place, right time. Wrong place, right time.
Wrong place, right time.
Yeah, correct.
I agree with the idea that like I would read a full book about the making of, like, maybe if him and Molly Ringwald co-wrote it and like alternated chapters, because I would love to hear what they thought about the making of. I once again stand firm in my belief that she should also not end up with Ducky, though, because I think he is literally just as toxic.
Yes.
Because he spends most of the movie being like, oh, why don't you date me? We're friends, right? Let's kiss.
Incel behavior.
Yeah,
Incel
incel behavior. But you
big incel energy.
Yes.
But you're 100% right. He's miscast, and it's interesting that John Hughes's relationship with whatever you think of his relationship with Molly Ringwald, which like is both like a really close friendship, but awfully like weirdly parasitic because he like was kind of reliving his life through her. I think he bowed to her whim on that, and I think it was a bad move.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, like after our John Hughes episode, I was like, false gods. Because, you know, Kate, to what you were saying, like a lot of those movies' problems is because it's coming from the mind of this like fucking stuck in neutral white straight guy who came from like the suburbs and who had like a vision of what American youth was supposed to be. And it's like,
right.
God,
and for all of his talk of rebellion, like also secret conservative, which is like really frustrating as well. And that's the part that still gets me about, like, if you go back and listen to our John Hughes episode, there are some bombshells in there that I think most people don't realize about him.
I know. I thought I was going to go into the episode being like, wow, I love revisiting this place. But I was like, wow, that was a fucking farce that I was fooled into believing was the truth. If he was the guy that was like, you know, yeah, I created this like world and, you know, he just doesn't talk about it, or he never was really like wanting to talk about like, you know, the process or like, you know, all the things that he did, because he did make a lot of these iconic movies. Like I still think, you know, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and, you know, for better or worse, those movies are such cultural touchstones. But like,
I mean, it was upsetting to me when we did the John Hughes episode to name Weird Science my 1-star review. Yes. But going back and watching Weird Science, I was like, oh no, like I like related to these people, and now I'm like, that what was wrong with me?
Yeah, and it's even if he had ever just been like answer for your crimes, man, like answer like I don't need to fucking crucify John Hughes. But it's just like, hey, like, you know, what was the thinking behind this? I'm like, yeah, this is fantasy. It's not real. Like, if watching those movies, I think if you understand, like, this is a fantasy, this is not reality. But when you're a kid and watching this, you think that's reality. And so, like, it's this, if Yeah, whatever.
To bring it back,
I'm going to step off my soapbox now.
To bring it back to Andrew McCarthy, though, I think I don't know if he would give it his 1-star review for performance, but I think that in a certain aspect he agrees with you, Kate. I think he like addresses it in the book as like, I don't know why I was here, and like I did it and it blew up and people were happy about it, but like, you know, and then pulling him from this play that like another thing that he thought he wanted to do, because he's like, I want to be on the stage, and then was kind of a nightmare process where it's like him and Ving Rhames and Wesley Snipes getting new pages every day. He's just like, I don't know.
Yeah. He got caught up in the John Hughes universe, you know?
Are you late for something?
Yeah, I am, as a matter of fact. But I mean, it's no big deal. It's fine. Listen, do you want to go out Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. 7 o'clock? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Well, where do you live? I'll pick you up. Where do you live?
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be working on Friday, so you can just pick me up at the mall. Okay.
Good pick, Kate. Gavin, how about you?
So mine is actually the film that I do think ended his career, which is 1990's Quiet Days of Clicky. It is like a Claude Chabrol film, as I mentioned. Claude Chabrol, French New Wave director, very frank about sex and very French. And this is a film where it's based off the autobiographical novel by Henry Miller, and Andrew McCarthy plays Henry Miller, but also known as Joey in the film. And it's him and his friend Carl and their like sexual adventures around France during this like very free era. But like, it's literally just like having sex with one woman, going to the next woman, and having sex, going to the next woman. It starts with this flashback where he's in heavy old age makeup, which is really terrible because he also has that baby face. And so you never buy it because he's like, back in my day, young woman. And then all the women that they're like pairing him with are like clearly, you know, I mean, him and Carl have a double wedding with like a 16-year-old girl. At one point, yeah.
Cool.
And so most of them are presented as like underage or like underdeveloped, and it's hard to watch. And so I sat there through all 120 minutes of it. It's a full 2 hours going like, I want to die.
Yeah.
I would rather die than. And so like, yeah, it's just really bad. Like I said, it's trying to be really deep and philosophical, but it doesn't treat women well. And I think my Letterboxd review was like, we've let men write history for far too long. and that's what it feels like. It's like, yeah, France was like a free place and it was full of sex and you could do whatever you wanted if you're a man.
Yeah. Fair.
You mustn't trust him. First of all, he's an American.
Really? From Hollywood?
Why Hollywood?
It's because they make movies.
And secondly, you mustn't trust him because he's a writer, a storyteller. All he wants to do is capture on paper anything that's alive.
Have you been to Hollywood?
Yes, I worked there.
What's all this about? Do you want to become an actress?
I want to be a ballerina. My grandma promised she will help me.
Why not? I mean, here we are, 3 foreigners in Paris. Let's make the most of it, huh?
My pick, I think, has to be, 91's Year of the Gun. I think it's just kind of like him trying to shoehorn into this action Mission Impossible type situation that like, clearly he was just not, there's a scene where like he's getting the shit beat out of him and I was like, this is so uncomfortable. Like, and I was like, clearly he's not like an athletic man. I was like, he can't fight back. It's so unbelievable that he could be like an action star. John Frankenheimer, who was known for The Manchurian Candidate, I was like, this is what this movie is trying to be. It's like, it's Italy and it's fucking crazy, guys. There's like this group of people who are like the mafia and it's fucking crazy. And there's also a scene in this movie that was so deeply upsetting. He has like this lover and it's this like Italian woman, and
I will give it a shout out. That's I might be mispronouncing it, but Valeria Golino, who
yes.
I love, and like not great in this movie, but like seek out her other projects. She's very good.
There's a scene where she is lipsticking her nipples, and then having like very
a common thing. Who hasn't?
As
right.
you do.
Yeah.
Right.
Who
Normal.
among us?
And then goes and has like very angry sex with like the villain of the movie. It's kind of like this little twist where, you know, oh no, his lover is actually bad or whatever. But like angry sex with her, just like brightly red nipples. And I was like, what is this?
That's
I was
how
like,
you know she's evil, Louis. Those were her horns.
Yeah, I was like subtle filmmaking, very, you know, important political discourse happening here. It's just nothing about this movie for me works. From like I was like, oh, if you're gonna be fucking crazy with red nipple lipstick or whatever, like then be the kooky movie. But like it truly, the ending is him sitting on a couch being like, and so war is bad. And then Sharon Stone from like, I don't know, wherever she is.
She's in another war-torn place because...
Yeah, she's war reporting and she's like, actually war is more bad than you think. So how about that? I was like, okay. He's just so unbelievable. Like, you know, he doesn't get to use any of his charm. He's like, again, a writer who's like wanting to write about the big, meaningful things in life. It's just like everything I hated about St. Elmo's Fire, but make it like action thriller now. So yeah, The Year of the Gun is my 1-star review.
There's no such person as Nella Marucci. I made him up.
Well, then he's the only one because everybody else is real.
It is a fucking novel. It is the first draft of a fucking novel. I'm gonna change all the names. Nobody's gonna be recognizable when I'm finished. It's gonna be like Day of the Jackal, General de Gaulle mixed up with fictional ones.
I don't believe you. It reads like a piece of hard journalism.
It is meant to. Every piece of information in that manuscript has already been published somewhere else.
What about the plot to kidnap Aldo Moro?
It's the goddamn plot of the novel.
A novel that was written by a man who penetrated a terrorist cell.
No one has ever penetrated a terrorist cell. I know one journalist who tried, and he got himself shot in the head and left to die in front of his wife. Now, maybe that is your idea of an acceptable risk, but it is not mine.
Was there anything else? Like, are there other... there are obviously other misfires.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a wormhole.
There's a big chunk of the career that is misfires.
Yeah, it's misfire after misfire. Night of the Running Man, Dream Man, were things that I did not like watching.
I do want to say, out of the things I think people have seen, I think maybe the biggest is Less Than Zero, which once again, as Louis said, it's not a terrible movie, and you can, when you're watching it, you can tell where the story is and like where everywhere that they went wrong, but he is not right for that role.
Yeah. The movie was so affecting to me though. I was like, do I need to read this fucking book? Like, what the fuck?
I mean, it's Bret Easton Ellis. It's
hard.
Know,
but then that's the thing though. But then I was like, I don't know a lot about this guy, but I was like, he looks very white and problematic.
That's correct. I believe those are both in his bio.
True.
But I cannot stress, like, I dove into this episode being like, oh my god, I'm finally gonna watch St. Elmo's Fire. What are all the gals talking about? And I was like, I cannot believe they made Emilio Estevez the stalker. I cannot believe Demi Moore is like, I'm rich and want to kill myself because I don't know. I don't know why. All these white people problems that were just fucking ridiculous. It is it's almost like what's that thing? Like a warning sign. Like, don't do this if you grow up. Like, children, don't.
I will say, and I know they're going for like a variety in the friend group for St. Elmo's Fire, except for if you're, not white. Yeah. But the my favorite is Mayor Winningham, where I was just like, why does this woman hang out with these people?
Yes. Yeah. She's like the soft-spoken nerdy gal.
Yeah, I was like, she's got better things to do with her time.
She's trying to serve soup at the, fucking free soup kitchen. And has to deal with her fucking bratty friends. Well, I guess it's because she's the rich friend. That's the twist.
Yeah.
She's the money girlfriend. I felt so bad. They put her through all that shit with Rob Lowe. Rob Lowe, who is like awful in this movie. Like, his character is the worst. I was like, you smelly jazz man, go fucking
play. A smelly jazz man who's like, I'm gonna go back to university and like play football with my fraternity brothers who don't even remember me because I'm too old. I wasn't here. Like,
sad.
Sir.
I was like, what the fuck? I mean, it's almost like this movie is just like growing up, like anxiety growing up the movie, like it's just it fully feels like, the false start of adulthood. Like, I get that. Like, and that's probably why a lot of people responded to it. Like, oh yeah, there are issues, or it's hard post college. Like, who am I? What am I doing? Whatever. But my God, like, these people graduated and then all stayed around each other. I was like, that doesn't happen. Like, go fucking live your life.
One good anecdote, by the way, that does come from this before we move into our 5-star reviews is that the neighbor, Demi Moore's neighbor that she tries to set Andrew McCarthy up with, the actual gay guy, became really good friends with Andrew McCarthy. And they've like,
we love him.
Yeah.
Love him.
And
yeah.
they've gotten jobs together and everything. They're still friends to this day. So they like hang out and shit. Because he said he's not friends with many actors. He doesn't want to be. So like,
I believe it. I mean, after all the shit that he went through, with his addiction, and then also like, honestly, like a lot of the Brat Pack was dealing with this shit. Like, it was the fucking 80s. People were feeding them coke and like drugs. Robert Downey Jr. famously like had a very similar meltdown that his character does. Demi Moore was in rehab before shooting this fucking movie.
Yeah, supposedly Joel Schumacher brought her to the table read, and the first thing he said was like, "I just want to congratulate Demi Moore on completing rehab," and everybody clapped for her. And Andrew McCarthy was kind of like, "I don't know what this means."
Yeah, yeah. I'm not surprised about that. Okay, let's get into our 5-star reviews. Kate, what do you got?
I mean, I think it is without question, it is for me Weekend at Bernie's. I don't think that any other movie has so perfectly captured his charm, because I think if any other actor played this character, he would be like smarmy, but you love him. He's a lovable fuck up. You obviously don't want him to get murdered. He and Jonathan Silverman are so funny together.
They are so good.
It's just like charming and effervescent, and yes, it is a very silly movie, and they just really make it work. There's great physical comedy. They're just delightful together, which of course doesn't really explain Weekend at Bernie's 2. I guess you can only get that magic one.
There was early 2000s. There was a script for Weekend at Bernie's 3 going around.
Wow.
Maybe. Oh my god, what would he would just be a skeleton. Skeleton.
Stop motion skeleton Bernie.
I thought Mr. Silverman is so dreamy in this movie.
They're both super dreamy.
Yeah,
in different ways.
I love the scene of them like on the rooftop, with like the kiddie pool, and they're like going over the reports. Yeah, and it's like hot. I was like, I know that fucking summer day. They are having so much fun. I think this is like, also he's a little bit removed from the Brat Pack of it all, but he's still able to have fun, which like they were not really letting him do in a lot of these movies after the Brat Pack. Yeah, I think that movie, still funny, ridiculous conceit, but played off so well. The idea of like, well, number one, being not mega rich in New York and like somehow smuggling your way into like the elite world is something that most people who live in the city will like relate to and be like, oh fuck. And then there's like having everything go awry is so fun. And he's just charms the pants off of you.
So I had a couple, for as much as we've been sort of negative, there were actually a couple that we didn't even talk about that I was thinking of. But I think in the end, I actually have to back Kate up on this. I think Weekend at Bernie's is my favorite performance of his. And I kind of rewatched it. I was like, oh, I don't really need to rewatch this. I've seen it so many times as a kid. So I kind of rewatched it on a whim. And I was like, you know what? Like, there's stuff that doesn't work in this movie. There's stuff that doesn't hold up. But he's so good. And he's very good at... I think the thing that you're sort of describing, Louis, too, about that freedom that he's given is he doesn't have to, he's like no longer the leading man. And I know this is still very early, like, because it's 89, but they allow the space for Jonathan Silverman to be the leading man.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's
the one who has the love interest.
Right.
Andrew doesn't have a love interest. Yeah.
He's like the goofy sidekick.
Right, exactly. And I think because of the lessons he picked up on this film, from being able to direct his own scene to being able to improv the way he did, he said that the house he was staying at was just filled with board games. So he brought that Monopoly to the set. And there's an entire scene that's based around him playing Monopoly with dead Bernie.
Yeah.
And so that's all him. He's allowed to play. His costumes were him. He based his costumes off of the outfits his aptly mentioned teacher that he like subletted his house from, because he was like hanging out with him. He was like, I want to dress like him. So he went to like Salvo's and picked up these outfits. And in a way, it's the same thing with Mannequin, but it was only the shoes. In Mannequin, if you notice, he's always wearing bowling shoes. And that was the thing that, and so like, I think there's so much of Andrew McCarthy just being goofy and allowed to play as himself and really expand on this character that probably like was funny on the page, but like not as funny. The whole idea of him tying fishing wire to Bernie's arm so he could lift the arm so Bernie can wave. That was him, you know.
Incredible.
So like I think really that this is the movie that shows like he's kind of brilliant, and he's able to like when he's able to turn that charm on, it really works.
Larry? Yeah? You want to come in here for a minute, huh? Yeah. Look, Rich is instant, okay? That's fine. Good. What? Look what I found in his pocket. Jesus. I never knew he was into the drug scene. God, look how much is here. This is not recreational, Rich. This is a career. This man needs some help, you know that? If he's not careful, he's gonna wake up one morning dead. I watch 2020. I know the statistics. I read. What?
Larry Lomax is dead.
No, you can't be. Why do these things always happen to me?
Well, I guess I'm the only one that it's left to me to leave the Bernie gang, even though I think Weekend at Bernie's is really excellent. I was just so gooped and gagged by 1994's Dead Funny. I think and I will say, I think he's very good in those first three movies. Like, I think Class, Benneker Gang, and Heaven Help Us, he is so natural, so good, so charming.
I was shocked at how good he is at Benneker Gang, and I did not like that movie, but I was like, there's a part where he has to pretend to be a grandpa, and it's the worst makeup I've ever seen in a movie, and he's literally just like, I'm an old man, and I was like, I'm sold.
But
Whatever.
he's not like pushing it. He's
Right.
he's not like, you know, he's not a showy actor, and so he's so natural. And so in the depths of the 90s, after, you know, the Brat Pack, to see Dead Funny, and I was like, oh, now this is a mature Andrew McCarthy, and he's found that like ease again. I think that movie is so hot. I think him and Elizabeth Pena, like, there's a whole scene where she's just like pouring honey on him and like, you know, licking his chest and pouring all this food on him, and he's just like so sexy. I also think he's very funny. There's a scene where he comes over and he's dressed up as like a hot dog salesman or something, and
hot.
it is funny and it is hot at the same time, because I think him and Elizabeth Pena have so much chemistry, and it's just, I don't know, I'm a sucker for that genre of movie, which is basically like 90s movie made for $5, about New York City. Like it's just, it also reminded me, or it felt like his return to New York. It felt like, you know, with him, he literally was living in Greenwich, you know, loved the city, wanted to be a New York guy, and this movie kind of just lets him be that, but also has like, you know, this dark edge, because he does have secrets. He is not being like totally honest with her. I think Elizabeth Pena is really good in the movie. There are no like flop actors in the movie. The ending is cruel, but you know, I think for me, his performance in this movie, this really showcases everything that I love about him. So if you can find it, Dead Funny, definitely worth your watch.
Don't you want to have a baby?
Just 8.
I'm serious.
Oh, no, I don't want to have a baby. I don't. All that crying and diapers and rushing to the hospital because it's all purple and it's swollen, you don't know what to do, and then before you know it, it's a teenager, and you got PTA meetings and zits and drugs, and it amazes me anybody wants a baby. We're not even married.
Lots of women have babies without being married.
You wouldn't want my baby. It would never amount to anything.
Hey, Reggie.
What?
Why are you so down on yourself?
I'm not down on myself. I just don't want to be a daddy.
It'll be the best thing that ever happened to you, really.
You are the best thing that ever happened.
Is there anything else that you guys want to shout out that you recommend or liked?
I have two, and I will do them as quick as possible.
Okay.
There's a film from 1996 that's a Spanish-American film, even though it's all in English. It's by Isabel Cosette. I think I'm saying that right. She's a Spanish filmmaker. She's very prolific. This was her first film in English. It's called Things I Never Told You, and it's him and Lily Taylor. And it's very like 90s indie. Like, there's a lot of like, I'm saying really profound things, but they're so good together. They have so much chemistry, and I loved watching them. And this movie is populated with just really great side characters. Leslie Mann's in it in a very early role. Debbie Mazar, who like casually reveals midway through the film that she used to be a man, and no deal is made of it. And I'm just like, that's awesome. And also Seymour Cassell, who plays Andrew McCarthy's father. And I think it's deals a lot with like this. We didn't even talk about the stuff with his father, where his father was constantly asking him for money. And so like that was their relationship, and he eventually had to cut his father off. This felt like that, where like Seymour Cassell at one point asks Andrew McCarthy for a hug, and Andrew McCarthy acts like it's the most foreign thing anybody has ever said to him. It's great. I would highly recommend it. And Alexis Arquette is in it as well. She's really fantastic. But it is all on YouTube, and I would highly recommend watching it. And then the other one that I saw that I really liked is a movie nobody is going to watch, but if you do, you'll get a lot out of it. It's called Anything But Love, which is a film from 2002. It's like kind of a musical, kind of not. He plays a piano player. There's this woman named Isabel Rose who she wants to be a lounge singer. She falls in love with this piano teacher, but she's engaged to somebody else. It's a very conventional plot. I like the way it's shot a lot, though, and I really like their chemistry, but it is every piece of dialogue is ADR'd in the movie. And so the performances don't always match, and that's a really hard thing, I think, to get into. But I really enjoyed this movie, and I think it's really cute and sentimental and sweet.
Well, I don't even know if the Cliff Mendelson thing is going to happen.
It has nothing to do with work, you know that.
What about Berlin? And what an amazing opportunity to travel.
I am in love with you.
Elliot, we haven't even...
I think Isabella Rose's character, Billy Golden, like maybe would be too much for me in real life. She's like a musical theater gal, and it's like, But Eartha Kitt's in it as herself, and
incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it looks like a 50s musical, even though it's set in contemporary like 2002.
Anything that you would recommend, Kate?
No, I mean, I think it's just so funny to hear all these different picks, because it's like, yeah, he's had this very strange career, and was some bad patches, but there's some real gems in there that people really should try to like seek out.
Yeah.
And it's made me sort of wistful for, maybe he should come back and act.
I wouldn't
but
mind
I don't want him
it.
to do it if he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
I want Andrew to be happy.
Yeah, be happy, Andrew. Okay, before we get out of here, let's do our mixed reviews review.
My 1-star review was, unfortunately, for Pretty in Pink, the 1986 classic, not so classic anymore.
Yeah.
And my 5-star review is for the bona fide comedic classic, still great to watch today, 1989's Weekend at Bernie's.
Love the pick.
My 1-star review was Quiet Days and Clicky from 1990, and my 5-star review was also 1989's Weekend at Bernie's.
God, you guys are such little Bernie snobs over here. My 1-star review was 1991's Year of the Gun, and my 5-star review is 1994's Dead Funny.
All right, let's get into that fast forward.
Do we know if he's working on anything?
I think he supposedly he has a movie that he is going to be in, but I mean, this is normally a section where we talk about sort of what we want for, other than if we know anything that they have coming up. I think it's time for him to direct a feature film. I think, he's written books. He did write a YA novel, by the way, Louis.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which I was like, Louis should seek this out. I think it's time for him to get behind the camera and make a full movie. Not a direct-to-video movie, not an HBO movie. Like, we need to see it in theaters. I think he'd be really good at it.
Yeah. It feels like the vibe he's going for is of, why podcast brain? Why? Dazed and Confused guy?
Oh, Linklater.
Linklater, yeah. It feels like that's the vibe he's going for. It feels like he's most comfortable in these smaller movies. It feels like, he directed so many fucking episodes of Orange is the New Black. It feels like that's where he might thrive in. So I wonder, why there hasn't... why he hasn't, had a passion project that he wanted to get off the ground. He certainly knows enough people in the industry. I listened to, half of his interview with Alec Baldwin on his podcast, and they were just talking shop, okay? It was very, and it was wild how they were both talking about how yeah, we've made some pretty shitty movies. You know how it goes. And talking about being behind the camera and how TV, is, where they both are kind of safe now. But in my head, I'm like, oh, well, that certainly Andrew McCarthy then has enough connections to probably get something going. But yeah, I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly he's directed enough TV that he knows how to direct. There's no question about that. I love he directed an episode of Nora is Aquafina from Queens.
Yeah.
So there's still this comedy in him. So it's yeah, maybe a more honest but still funny coming of age comedy could be an interesting way to marry all the different parts of his career that we like so much.
It's funny. He also mentioned that in that Alec Baldwin interview, Alec Baldwin essentially accused him of not wanting it enough. And that's why things went south. I don't think that's true. I think maybe he didn't want to be in the position that he was being pigeonholed into. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that he doesn't want to be in this business. It's very clear to me that he wants something, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's, what we can hope for is something longer. I also do wonder though, he does have kids, and I wonder if the idea of doing a movie taking that much time to do a movie versus, showing up and doing 2 weeks worth of shooting on a show. Right. I wonder if that's maybe what keeps him from doing it, but I don't know. I mean, I like him. I think the thing we're all coming away from is he's great, but it just,
it's just funny. He is so good, but then it was almost as if oh, he's successful. Hollywood is this guy's successful, but then they're but he's not a leading man. So what do we do?
Yeah.
I was when they're wait, he's not buff or athletic. He's just kind of a charming everyman that can't sell, our big budget things that we want to make. So what do we do with this guy? And he was just I don't know. And this kind of was kind of floating through this career. It's funny, in his book, he talks so much about how this thing, the Brat Pack of it all, kind of trapped him and defined him and made him a superstar to a generation of people, and kind of how it was just inescapable, right? His entire career is that. But he's but I'm an old man now. I that is so far behind me, and it really has so little to do with what I'm really passionate about now. So yeah, I don't know that if we've ever had someone on an episode about someone whose career has really taken a left turn, somewhere else, who was truly a megastar.
Yeah, we've talked about people before who were stars that wish they could be character actors. But I don't think that's even him. I don't think he I mean, the times that he's delved into it, he's been good. I mentioned that movie Stag, where he finally does puts on the fake teeth and but I don't think that was where his passion was either. I don't think he's yeah, I want to, it's the Artful Dodger of it all. He's yeah, I don't mind being a secondary lead, but I'd rather be behind the scenes.
I'm glad, Kate, you picked Andrew, because I had a lot of blind spots from his career, but also there was, you said, some gems that really were so surprising to me, because I was after watching Dream Man, I was oh, a lot of these movies look like they're going to be this, and a lot of them were, but there are some that just, I mean, dead funny, just shocked the hell out of me, and it's just kind of a shame that people never gave him a chance to do more things like that. And maybe he's just kind of over it. And fuck Alec Baldwin, you don't want it enough. Fuck you, dude. What does that even mean? You don't want it enough.
I mean, there's enough problems with Alec Baldwin anyways, but I just think I think it's funny that would be the thing that he would be oh, you don't want it enough. And it's
but yeah, I think Andrew McCarthy's attitude and personality is not the fucking Alec Baldwin involved. He's not a schmoozer. When he's saying, he's I was on set, I wasn't really talking to these people. I was part of the Brat Pack because I was in the movie. I was not really their friends. He was friends with Rob Lowe from a movie before the Brat Pack. Right. It's he really kind of got sucked into this tornado, but then spit out. And he landed in Ireland, where he married a lovely woman and wrote a book about it. So good for him. Good for Andrew McCarthy.
I mean, I think that wraps him up perfectly, and only the best to him. And I do once again really hope that we maybe get a movie out of him or something.
Yes,
but
he's still young.
He's still young. Oh yeah, very young. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for bringing Andrew McCarthy to the table.
I'm so happy.
We're going to give you a moment now to plug anything that you want, anything your heart desires. Where can people find you online, and where can they read your stuff?
People can find me mostly on my Twitter account, which is my name, but missing an E in the middle. So it looks like Kate Erbland.
Kate Erbland.
Yeah, I made the mistake 13 years ago when I signed up for Twitter. Ew. And I've just kind of rolled with it. And then obviously you can read my stuff on IndieWire.com, and you can read everything else from our wonderful film and TV teams.
Excellent. We love that. Again, truly, thank you for coming on. We love having just like so thoughtful and fun. I'm so glad Gavin was like, Kate's like a real critic, and I really trust her. And I love that you came here and said, Weekend at Bernie's, Oscar.
I can only be me.
Thank God. Thank God. And we're here to talk to you about Oscar-nominated Mannequin, okay? Get into it.
But if you do want to find us online, you could always contact us on our Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
We're on Facebook, just type in The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us little love notes by writing to us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
We're also on Instagram, just type in the_mixed_reviews.
And if you want to listen to our back catalog of episodes, just like you listen to this one, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, iHeart, Audible, and if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please stop by, leave us a 5-star rating and write a little review. It helps the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you're tired of hearing about the algorithm, but it does help us out. And especially if you like even leave like a little thing that just says like meow or like hey or something.
Not meow.
Yeah, meow, you know. I'm sorry. I saw one of Kate's cats. I either saw Felix or Oscar earlier, and I was just like, oh, I want a cat.
Felix has been mostly around, and when I keep looking, it's because he's like in the kitchen. I'm like, are you seeing like a bug or something?
No, he's making grilled cheese.
Yeah, he's just being like a weirdo.
I love that Gavin is so distracted by cats. It's so funny.
I'm like, I want one. But thank you so much for listening to us and coming back every 2 weeks. We will be back in another 2 weeks with another subject about which we will have mixed reviews.
Bye.
Bye-bye.